but I was away. A draft monument, next topics we should look at in regards to the timeline. And they suggest, right, 2 tracks. We would have 11 meetings in both tracks. If the MSBA includes us, either December or February, we would have 2 meetings a month. If the MSBA passes on us this year, we would have one, we would basically have 1 meeting.
Do you want me to hand this out?
Yes, yeah, would you please? I wasn't sure if you had that. Okay.
So, is it okay if I talk a little bit?
Sure, yes.
So
yeah.
at the last meeting, you sort of charged me, or I volunteered, my memory is failing. But I put together a list of draft topics, and I thought we could have, I'm proposing for the group's consideration, 11 meetings, and what Bill's talking about are sort of 2 different timelines. So the MSBA is going to potentially take some action at either a December or February meeting, and if they take a positive action, then I think we should accelerate our timeline, and if they take no action, which I would see as a negative action, right? And it's just I guess it's not really negative, it's just no action, then I think we could have a slightly lengthier timeline. So those were the 2 things there. The other stuff, and then I'll talk through the meetings to get reaction to it, was I think as we're doing this, we should have a regular feedback loop to both share and gather information, and then as we're coming up with ideas, to test out those ideas on particular subgroups that might be relevant, right? So if one of the ones I propose is around CVTE, like the vocational ed stuff, then we should get a bunch of business people in to both help craft the thinking there and to get feedback on that part of the plan. If we decide we want to do something like a pre-health program or certified nursing assistant program, we should connect both with the folks at Fairview and the folks that are running the nursing program at BCC, and then employers on the other end who might either hire certified nursing assistants in the short term or nurses in the long term. And we have all sorts of good data from the Regional Employment Board that says if we were to start one program, that is the program to start in terms of growth of people, because I mean, obviously we're all getting older, but we're getting older faster, and that's the big growth area right now, right? So, and that's an example. And then if we were to get to the point where we were talking about how to finance a potential project, then there are lots of people with very strong finance backgrounds. And some of it has to be with sort of in the constraints of what a regional school district does. So there'll be some hedge fund guy who comes and says we could do a 90-year bond with this, that, and the other, and that's just illegal, right? But there may be other folks who could actually help us think about doing something differently. So that's that. But if it's okay, Bill and Paul, then I thought I'd go through them all. I think, and I checked with Steve, I checked with John Winokur, I looked at the MSBA's process, and so what I tried to do was, if this group needs to make a recommendation to the school committee in May, what information do we need to make that recommendation, and what are the steps and things we need to study to get there? This is what appeared to me to be the most important stuff. There's the possibility I overemphasize something or I miss something, and if that's the case, then we can just adjust it. So the first one, I mean, and I think it's not like really our first meeting, but the first meeting in this series of things, like our next meeting, I think would be around enrollment scenarios and us in relation to other districts. Right, so our enrollment's largely flat. It's gone down over years. When I look at projections, I don't think it's going down much more. The debate is around, well, our enrollment's stable. It's stable on the back of choice kids from other districts, particularly Southern Berkshire, right? So I think we should talk about that, look at some of that data. And then are we going to do a status, or would we, and we may need to anticipate all three, like a status quo thing, no change, a room for an expanded region or high school region. Do we have conversations with neighboring districts about joining a high school region? It's pretty clear all our neighbors want to keep their K-8 opportunities within their home districts, right? But at a certain point, Southern Berkshire may not have enough kids to run a viable high school, maybe, right? Richmond only goes through 8th grade. We have a tuition agreement with them. There may be an opportunity to change that. So it may make sense to do something different there. And then the last one would actually be to do that, right? To enter into some agreement with our neighboring towns to change our thing. The reason, and we'll get into this more when we do that, why both of those are interesting is we get a huge incentive from the MSBA for doing an expanded region. The dollar value of it on a $60 or $70 million project is $3.5 to $4 million, right? So if we have a new dance partner, we get $3.5 or $4 million. So it's a big deal. The next, I think, 2 meetings then would be what's lacking now and what, looking at our educational needs, but what's lacking now and what would new spaces let us do differently. A number of you completed the survey, and I have that data, I pulled it together, and we could look at that. But I think this was in addition to having an expensive project the last time, this was our biggest misstep, was we didn't say, like, everybody gets the safety part, everybody gets the energy efficiency part, everybody gets the good space means less maintenance on the space part, but I don't think we articulated well what new science labs would let us do differently, what new vocational spaces would let us do differently, how that would impact kids and their learning. So I think this would be a good meeting to bring in some teachers and some other people who could share their thinking there. The fourth meeting is the nuts and bolts, and this is the stuff that Steve really understands well, but the health, safety, efficiency, maintenance, and other building needs, that's everything from how much power we're using to fixing a roof that leaks year over year to windows that anybody can open and walk in or out. So we've got a really nice security system in terms of our doors, but every other window you can just walk in through, right? So that. The fifth meeting I recommend would be us revisiting the potential scope of work. So renovate the existing building and don't build anything new. Renovate the building and build something new, or just build new, right? And then when the new building's done, then take down the old building. And there are advantages and disadvantages to each of those, and we could look some at what our neighbors did at Taconic and Greylock and what they're proposing to do at Wacona, right? And I think there are other places we could look at too. The meeting after that, I thought, could be around financing and incentives, so we could pull all these pieces together. So the financing, the big choices, I think, are do you do it over 30 years or over 40 years? The incentives are for energy efficiency. There are different levels of energy efficiency, and you get points for that. There's changing the region, you get points for that. Steve, can you remember other things you get? Weird
if we were to build a brand new building and use one of their models, we'd get pretty good, actually a pretty big chunk of money for that.
Right. You get some money for repurposing existing space too. Like if we did something funny where we kept the gym in the auditorium, but not much else, we'd get some funky credit for that. So we could go through a list of all the incentives and talk about the advantages and disadvantages of that. The seventh meeting I thought would be around building support. So how do you do community outreach in the context of this? And hopefully at every meeting, we'll be inviting different people to join us. And if we're lucky, the media will cover it some, and we can do some other stuff. But we build support as we're going. The 8th meeting, I think, is us structuring a recommendation and starting to commit it to paper or PowerPoint or Prezi or something, right? But taking some time for us to get more on the same page and commit our work to paper, and then turn around and present it to the school committee. Presumably after that, then we'd get some more public feedback, and we could build that in again, and then present a revised or final set of recommendations to the school committee. So that's sort of an overview. I think it's pretty thorough. I definitely have some blind spots, and if anybody sees them either now or later, we can look at it. What I can do is for each of these meetings, I can work with my team and sort of like we do our finance subcommittee meetings and prepare a packet for each meeting. So the enrollment one, I can give you projection, like historical enrollment and projections for the next 10 years and different scenarios if it's us alone, it's us in relation to somebody else, it's even bigger than that. And I think that would be a very good conversation. The other thing I'd leave open is this may look like the right things now are pretty good, but we should be flexible. And if we're going through these meetings and we realize that we need to stick in another 2 meetings after the 4th meeting, then let's do that. So,
Peter,
yeah.
just a quick question. Let's just look at meeting number 1.
Right.
Are you able to present us with these enrollment figures
Okay.
now? Is it October 1?
I
Which
have,
was the new thing?
I went to this meeting last night in the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, and I have 3 copies and plus my own of Berkshire County Public School enrollment projections, February 1st, 2018, that cover every school district in Berkshire County. Okay, just at the top, I'll just mention that the Berkshire Hills Regional School District, according to their projections, had 71 fewer students enrolled than projected. It appears the district has had a large number of students moving out or choosing out than projected. This movement tends to be more in the elementary middle school. Births in the district are on target from what was originally projected, but the increased movement out will lead to a low projection. The district is projected to lose 15% of students between 2018 and 2028, and that translates in a number to 180. And I have 3 copies here. I didn't want to steal 14 copies. So this is based on the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. Now I looked at Berkshire Hills and South Berkshire. And Berkshire Hills, according to here, and Peter, I think it's wrong, our freshman class, they have 144. But
It's like
Doug, is that wrong?
150.
We were
Right now?
153. I could actually go to Power School and get the exact number.
Yeah.
In 2018, they had 128, but then this year we have that bubble that comes in. And they had 144, but I thought it was a little more.
Did they explain how they got that?
No,
The
this was
projections?
just
'Cause I
word out.
find that highly suspect.
No.
I think that when they're
Terry
trying
was
to,
there for the whole thing. I don't think they got into that, did they?
I think when they're,
No, they never discussed them.
no,
They
yeah.
just handed it
No,
out.
so the guy who did it is Mark Malloy. I work with him on all sorts
Okay.
of stuff. I can check it. I think what I'll do is I'll bring 3 sets of projections, right? And like anything, it's like you look at polls in an election, and there's the conservative polling organization and the liberal one, and then the centrist one. I imagine that they have a little bit of a reputation for being the gloom and doom group, so I imagine they're on the conservative side. We have some district ones, and then we have some NESDEC ones that are impartial. But I'll bring all 3 of them, and presumably what we do is we look at all 3 and end up in the middle.
Because I just think that, I mean, they were, from what I understand you say, choice is a big factor in the lower grades, where that is so fluid and so dynamic. Like when Southern Berkshire started Egremont School, all of a sudden we had 10, 12 people wanting to go there. now they're not allowed in the lead problem, so they could very well come back. I know that because of our lower test scores in elementary school 2 years ago, last year, there was a lot of concern. This year, as we just learned in the last school committee meeting, we're not the only school in Berkshire County to have the highest grade. So
Right.
I could see a flux of people coming in. So I think when you go with choice, that is a very poor indicator for future. I think if it's based on population dynamics as far as people moving in and out, births, deaths kind of thing. But as far as choice, I am very leery of.
They did not
their,
give anything, and
data.
I don't know anything about it. I wasn't on the last group that came in. I know that in the forums in Great Barrington, this became a major topic of, people talking about, well, enrollment's down, why do we need a new building?
Right.
Why do we need to do this?
Bill, what did you say they had for enrollment for this fall?
For our district total,
Yeah, no, for the
High school.
high
freshman
school,
class.
okay, for the high school,
It's not what you.
okay, I did that.
49.
Let's see, Berkshire
You said
Hills.
120 something, didn't you?
No, that was last year.
The
Okay.
projection for grade 9 was 128.
Okay, they have 140 for 219. They have 144 in ninth grade, 127 in 10th, 116 junior year, 147 senior year. I didn't do the figures. I looked at us in South Berkshire, total K through 12.
So let me, rather than debating it now, let me
Right,
come
yeah.
back with their numbers, our numbers, and maybe NESDEC's numbers, and
That would be
and
good.
we'll look at it. But it is pretty fluid.
Yeah. That's more
So following up on Paul's question, so is tonight meeting one, or is meeting one going to be our next meeting?
Well, it's. I mean, really, I should have called tonight's meeting 0.
Okay.
But we had like meeting -4 already, right? I didn't know what to start calling.
No, I
it,
agree.
Right?
So-
meeting 1 after tonight.
Right, so what I would like for this enrollment scenario, because I know Paul touched on in the last go-around, there was a lot of, I think even though the school committee has made a persuasive argument for accepting choice students and that it's not a financial burden, it actually is a huge benefit as far as academically, socially for the kids in the district, but I would like to have the numbers as far as, because we legally are responsible for the next 50 years or however the building lasts, to provide education for everyone who lives in the district. So all the kids who are currently here, all the kids that choice out, which I know it's a net positive, but there's still a significant, and then every child who goes to private school.
Right.
Because we, I think, at a minimum, need to design a building that if they all decided to come here, which is our legal responsibility, that we have enough space for it. So, the population here, all the kids who choice out, as well as every kid who goes to a private school in the 3 towns, as well as probably Otis, Sandusfield, and Richmond.
Yeah. So I think what I can do, I could cut the data 50 different ways, but I think I can do projections in aggregate, and then I can do a deep dive on this year's class, what the number or classes, like what they are in each grade, what our choice in and out are, what our total obligation is, the thing you're talking
Right.
about. So all the kids, whether they're here or not,
Right.
plus the private school kids,
Right.
and get us some numbers. And then I think this group will be able to say, the minimum number we have to plan for is this, and the maximum number would be that.
Thank you.
Okay.
This would be, why don't I give you a copy, Peter, of this, and then we can use this too. This is one of those, this is a projection.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So they can, yeah, I did, there were a lot of copies, but I
And
know we're coming
I'll
tonight.
get an
Yeah.
electronic copy
I did
and
not
send it
wanna-
around to people.
It's on the planning
There's a
commission's
pile of them.
website.
Okay, good.
You know,
What
good.
about asking past, present, and future choice out in private school, high school?
Why they left.
Why they left, and if a new school, new space, learning spaces, better vibe, better feeling building would influence their decision to send the kid to the public high school.
Yeah, so we've not done that survey in a while. We could do it, and it's relatively easy to do it, particularly in the context of email and SurveyMonkey and all of that. My recollection from the last one I saw is that some people do it just because there's a philosophical commitment, right? So if you went through the Steiner School and you really believe in that way of educating,
Well, there's only 10 kids at that high school.
right, at that high school, right? So
Right.
so that's a subset. There's a small number of young women who go to Miss Hall's, and that's a particular choice. There's a subset of kids who go to boarding schools, ones that are like in driving distance or actual as day students, and then ones
Are
that
we losing families because of that?
yeah, I don't know, right? And a handful of kids in the younger grades choice out to Southern Berkshire because their parents work there at the school, like my neighbors, or one of my neighbors, or because it's on the way to work, right? And that's the case sort of both ways. And then some people because they were bullied or some other thing. So we can do that, and I think do that pretty quickly.
As a parent who did send my daughter to Miss Hall's, I think if we do a survey, be careful not to lead parents.
Mm-hmm.
And because we pulled my daughter out of public school because of two reasons. Bullying was one. And the second one is I didn't feel there was the academic initiative for young ladies to strive for more, and that's why I pulled my daughter out. It wasn't the bells and whistles of the school or anything like that, but if we do a survey, I would not want to see a question, if we had a nice new building, would you have kept your kid here? That's
Yeah,
the
no,
leading question. If you work with lawyers, you know.
We'd write it carefully, like
Yeah.
which of these factors contributed to your decision to
Physical plant, like, because,
right.
like I said, that wasn't even in the mix, the condition of the building or anything like that for us. And I would like to see a survey, and just being a parent of a child that we pulled out of public school and not Monument Mountain.
Maybe what I do is my favorite thing to do would be find somebody else who wrote a really good survey and just borrow their survey. But regardless, maybe what I do is I get a good one, I adjust it slightly for us, I run it by the group, and then I get it to people. Now, the thing that's slightly hard is I may not have everybody's, like a good email address for everybody who's not here, right? But maybe I can work with the 3 town clerks to do it in some way.
Can I just ask a school question? When a parent does move a child out of the district, are they asked at all why? I know, well, I worked for the superintendent, so she did ask why.
Yeah, no, sometimes we know and sometimes we don't know.
Yeah,
Right,
it's just
so,
curious. I think it's valuable information, that's all.
The time when it's the most obvious is 8th grade into 9th grade.
Mhm.
And most kids and parents go over to the high school, and even if they're not enrolling, they probably still go to see what the deal is. And then some subset choose not to. Almost all of those parents tell us what's going on.
Mhm.
Every once in a while, somebody just moves and
Mhm.
doesn't say goodbye, and we don't know what the deal is. But almost everybody tells us. Now, I think people are conflict averse, like it's human nature. So sometimes people will say they may not tell us the depth of the reasons why they're going, right? They may say something like it didn't work out, and they may not clarify whether it didn't work out because.
But anonymously, like what you're talking about.
They might.
The survey,
Yeah.
long after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll try to do that, and that's a good reminder. We've not done it in a long time. So Other reactions to this?
Well, Peter, I just wanted to get something else out, because the three scenarios that you present here, how are we going to look at number two? Room for expanded region or high school region?
Right.
That's, I think, a key factor in here.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, but
No,
I think it's a key factor.
I think
How are we going to approach it?
I think everybody does, and I think part of what we have to do is just make our assumptions explicit, right? So, and some of them are easier than others, right? So Richmond's got an 8th grade class of like 20 kids. And some of those kids are Richmond residents, and some of them are choiced in from Pittsfield to Richmond. Most of Richmond's students end up at Monument, right? And over the years, we have a very accurate percentage. I don't remember what it is, but it's like 92%, right? And the other kids that don't come to Monument either go to private school, they're from Pittsfield, so they go to Pittsfield or Taconic, or every year, like one kid goes to Lenox, right? So we know, it's all public information, right? We know what every class size is in Richmond through early K, and some are bigger and some are smaller, but they're all right around 16 to 20. And we could say, knowing that we get 93% of the kids from Richmond, those 16 to 20 kids translate into 14 a year going forward. So we could do that. We also know what's going on with Farmington River. And I don't know, and I'll look at it later, Bill. I don't know if their numbers were in there, but they're small and I think getting smaller. So that's another 20 kids a year potentially.
Yeah, they're in they're in the single digits coming 2021 according to this projection. Today in 218 they're 12, 219 15, 220 11, and then they go 9, 6.
Right.
The good news is South Berkshire. Well, it's at least from my perspective.
I know, I wasn't gonna ask it, but I,
Well, they're losing 25%.
Yeah.
It just seems to me the handwriting's on the wall there.
Yeah.
And I sat beside the chairman of the school committee, but I didn't talk to him too much. So, I mean, there is, you know.
I don't think,
there's
I
this-
think Bonnie's the new chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree with Paul. I think that's a key.
Right,
What are we doing?
so what I would do, Paul, is I would, again, do like a 1-year snapshot and then maybe model out the next 5 to 10 years, depending on how long it takes and how confident we are in the data. And then there would just be I'll try to do the math ahead of time, so it's on the sheets or the little presentation I do, but there'll also be raw data there, so if people wanna say, what happens if we get the Farmington River, the Richmond kids, and Southern Berkshire can't have a high school anymore?
That's the point that I'm really bothered by, is this whole idea of expanding the region has been discussed for I don't know how long now. And either it's time to say, yes, it's gonna happen, or no, it isn't, and if that's the case, we go on our own way and we're done with it. It doesn't have to be brought up again. I don't understand why, and I know there's a meeting, I think it's on October the 10th, that's what Steve told me anyway, with, I don't even know what it's called, where you guys are gonna be talking or gonna go to a meeting with Southern Berkshire, whatever it's gonna happen. I don't understand the problem. Yes, we're interested and we're gonna do it, or no, we don't care about doing it and be done with it.
Yeah, so I think we're interested. I don't know if our dance partners are, and as optimistic as Bill is about other districts' numbers, I don't know if people are actually understanding the implications of those numbers, right? So I've been going to meetings like this for, not like this meeting, like those other meetings for 8 years. and I'm working across multiple districts with the hopes of building a relationship to get this to happen. I don't, at a certain point, if you have 30 kids in a graduating class, 28 kids in a graduating class, at some point, they're gonna hit the wall and realize that they're not able to provide a wonderful, not to mention adequate education, and I think that's when they'll start having conversations with us. Right?
Then what you're really saying to me, I believe, is that forget about them. And let's go along our own way, and if they hit the wall later on, TS.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. That's like, I'm broadcasting on another channel than the one you're listening to. but I mean, I don't think we can rush it, right? It's a really complicated dance. At the last meeting, Steve Bannon said, we've been talking about this for years. Like, I don't want to use that expression, but like, make a decision. Right, he used another
You
word.
didn't want to say shit or get off the phone.
No, I knew somebody would say it instead.
But you're trying to make.
I think that
I'm
they
kind of
Paul's,
where Paul's at. It's
but
like
Paul is
trying to
saying
make
that-
brick and mortar
sorry.
decisions, which take a long time, and get this like the elephant in the room. Are we going to pay attention to it and project a regionalization of the high school, and then say, okay, that's the size the high school has to be?
Right. What I imagine is going to happen, and this goes back to what Jason was talking about. If our obligation is to have a school that holds all the residents of our 3 towns, whether they come to our school or not, that number will give us enough of a cushion to pick up the 100 kids from an unnamed neighboring district if they cease to be able to run a high school, right? So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they can happen simultaneously, and then the potential wiggle room we have is once we accept a choice student, they're ours until they graduate. At a certain point, if we built the building that was the right size for our community, right, and we'd have a big debate about what the right size is, and then we picked up the kids from a neighboring unnamed district, the way we could make space for those kids, we might have some built in anyway because of the folks that go to Catholic school or private school or boarding school, and if we didn't, then we could accept fewer choice kids, which would make room for the partnership to bring the other people in. The carrot for doing that is the dollar number I mentioned, the $3.5 to $4 million as on a project for expanding the region, right? So I don't want to say it's off the table because even getting the ear of the MSBA, it might be important for them to think it's a possibility, and then for us to actually get the Great Barrington voters to approve it, having them not have to pay $4 million would be great, right? And having the energy efficiency save us another $6 million would be good too. So I think we can have all the facts and work on it simultaneously.
What is I thought at one meeting, the capacity of Monument Mountain as it stands right now was stated. So what is the capacity? I thought.
Well,
it was-
and this is and I don't want to like talk double talk. Somebody told me that when they were at Monument Mountain, there were 800 kids in the
There
building.
was. I think when Steve and I graduated, there was a graduating
Yeah.
class of 180.
If I put 800 kids in this building as it is today, I would be fired by the state.
But then you
right?
have the different learning.
Well, we have different rooms.
learning.
I mean, you
Yeah.
look at just special ed. Special ed has taken over 4 rooms.
Right.
Right, and
there's-
even though we're not compliant with all the ADA things, there are ADA stuff, like we can't cram 800 kids into this building.
Well, you're talking different. But what I'm saying is when it comes to presenting, you're going to have people with that thought in
Right.
their head.
Yeah, there's a
Okay,
very.
we have 500, I'm looking at the district profile, 523 students, which is probably.
Right,
about
and I don't remember it, and you might remember it from the last time, but there's a very concrete formula now where for X number of students, you need X number of square feet.
Mhm.
And it depends on if it's a classroom or a lab or a gym
And
or an
that's the
auditorium.
MSBA.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's building
code.
That's
Oh,
state
that's
law.
building
That's,
code?
That's
Okay.
state law that the
No.
MSBA follows.
Okay.
Okay.
building
Peter,
law.
what you're saying though is, if we follow the formula Jason talked about, which is having a facility that's large enough to serve all the children in the community as they come into high school, it sounds like there's enough fluff in there that, do we really need to put a lot of thought into the what ifs, or do we just take that?
There's a cushion there. I
Yeah,
don't think
I
we
mean,
need to
the
beat that to
MSBA
death.
gave
Be
us a
good to know
number
what the cushion is.
last time, and let me, rather than speaking hypothetically about it, let me just bring the data to our next meeting. There's and it's driven by a number of things, and the MSBA did it and NESDEC did it separately, but it's the number of kids that live within our 3 towns, regardless of where they go to school.
Right.
And then they built in a little bit for the kids from Richmond and Farmington River. And then they build in a little cushion for kids potentially moving into, like they do an enrollment projection, but there's a little bit of cushion for an increase in enrollment. But it's not huge numbers, right? They're like, we'll get to a number that is somewhere between 500 and 700. And then we can go from there. Would you remember what the number was?
No.
I'll look it up, but it was like in the high 5s, and I imagine that would be the number we would get to again. And if we picked up the Southern Berkshire kids, many of those kids already choiced in anyway, so it would probably be a wash. Okay, so I got a lot of work to do.
So this is gonna be if the group agrees, this will be our agenda for next meeting, October 30th, is our 3 aspects here of enrollment and all the variables that have been mentioned. I would think that will take us 2 hours.
Yes, I mean, it'll probably take us 8 hours to pull the numbers together. Right?
So Peter.
Now, I was gonna say, several subgroups, when I saw that, I thought, would we have subcommittees of our committee here to look at some of these things that are mentioned? Like, does somebody wanna deal with the business side on career vocational tech ed? Does a group of people wanna look at the builders on health? Or I was thinking of Dan doing, being ahead of maybe 2 or 3 people on this committee that would look at the building, the safety, the efficiency, the maintenance, the building, because that's your strength, working with Steve. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out. Or do we wanna do it as a whole group?
Well, and maybe what makes sense is, like this first one, just Steve and I and probably Sharon have to pull this stuff together. But every other one, maybe a couple people check in preparing stuff for the whole group, right? So if Dan were up for meeting number 4, that Dan spends, Steve pulls together a bunch of stuff addressing that, and then he runs it by Dan to test it, and Dan says, I like those 4 things, but you missed these 2, and what's going on with that one? And then, so they work together to pull something for the whole, prepare something for the whole group.
I like that idea.
Maybe that makes sense. The other thing I'd love to do is, like, we've got Sean Flynn working overtime on this CVTE thing. I'd like him to work with some people to come and present stuff around that, right? And maybe bring in some community business people to also be part of that, right? So if we think that the needs are around healthcare, home building, horticulture as it relates to farming and culinary, then maybe we have a meeting and half the meeting is listening to some of those people talk to us about what their thoughts are, and then we react and have a conversation with them. I think that would be interesting.
What's that acronym stand for?
Oh, sorry, career, vocational, and technical education. It's the like fancy modern term for vocational education without the baggage of vocational education being seen as a dumping around.
I have another thought about that first meeting. If there is insight we can gain from the new Taconic school to see how that has impacted enrollment there. Because I imagine when a school is new or seriously renovated, I mean, common sense says that people would be more interested in going there. I'm curious if they have information about people that opted not to send to private school or choiced in from neighboring districts, because I think that's
I know they were
valuable.
like, have been going down. They went from like 900 there last year, there were 720, now they're at full capacity 840, and they're not taking anyone else.
So, and I think that the other thing we
They
can
have
do
a
with
waiting
that
list.
is maybe use that as as incentive to get a neighboring district, maybe one that is losing significant population, to somehow use that as incentive to commit to us now, to guarantee spaces, because there won't be as many choice spaces, I would assume, once this is renovated. Especially if we're thinking of expanding CBTE and, you know, saying, hey, I mean, it'd be great if we had an expanded health program, and, I mean, people will want their kids to be in there and to have a guaranteed spot.
Mount Greylock probably would be a better choice to look at, because Taconic's got a vocational component that they had before.
Okay.
And so my opinion is that it's a lot different, and it's a city school on top of it.
Uh-huh.
Plus, and I don't know if they have, where they still have intercity choice, where kids who actually should be on that side of the city that should be going to Pittsfield or have been able to opt in to go to Taconic. I'd like to see how Mount Greylock has fared since they actually basically rebuilt the building. See how how they were affected. Now, of course, Mount Greylock's got a lot of different demographics than we have too. So no matter what we choose.
I think we could look at Greylock as a case study. They built small, right? And they, because I'm up there negotiating, and it never ends, about the Hancock kids and the New Ashford kids. Mount Greylock built small, and they probably smaller than they should have. So they don't have much flexibility around space, which is interesting.
I would like to see, if we're gonna, if we're going to break up into subcommittees for maybe some of this, that 2 and 3, Doug's gonna be instrumental in that, because this has got to involve teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're talking meetings 2 and 3.
Meetings,
One-
yeah.
I don't
Not
want
enrollment.
theoretical stuff. I don't, well, if I hit this,
Right.
pie in the sky type stuff. They should be able to articulate what they could do that they can't do now. That is part of the curriculum that they're supposed to be teaching.
Yeah.
So I kind of think that 2 and 3 probably would be good to have some subcommittee help on this. And then maybe bring in representatives from the different disciplines to come in.
No, I think that's good. The one caveat I'd have there is I think the world of our teachers, and they, at the same time, they may not know what they don't know, right? So if you've been teaching this building for 30 years and you've never taught in another building, you might not be able to envision what you do with different space, right? You might be able to, but you might not be able to.
I would think the people in science would be able to, just because I taught.
No, I know.
And definitely social studies.
I'm not so sure.
So, I don't know. I think this is a good start. Let's see how we go, and we can make adjustments as we move along. I sometimes we do work that's a lot of subcommittee work. I think we've got enough meetings to begin with anyway. The subcommittee might be, the train keeps moving and we keep moving along, but we call on people individually to help out in preparing for particular sections, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And get teachers and community partners and other people that aren't in the room to be.
Well, I was just thinking we have particular strengths here. I mean, Carl Bradford's not here, but he seems to me, I'm on the Berkshire Hills Fund for Excellence, and he's the treasurer of that, and he talked about the library and how they financed the Stockbridge Library with no state aid. They did not want any state aid because of the problems that the Library Commission evidently said, almost like what we're saying here. When you accept state money, there's some certain things that you have to do. And so he said they went and they raised, I think he mentioned it here, they raised like $4 million on their own. And I'd like to see him and maybe Michelle, who's very financially, I think, with it, that you could deal with looking into some of the finances. I mean, Dan is very good in regards to construction. I remember at one of the forums, you mentioned some stuff that I'd never heard about before, and I talked to you about it after. I said, wow, that's really, I never was aware of that because I don't know anything about it. And there's a lot of us that have maybe a particular strength. So maybe if people would be willing to do that instead of, I don't like the subcommittee. We have, I don't know how many on the school committee already. I think we have 8 or 9. And I'm on at least 4 of them, so I wouldn't want to be on another one. But I think maybe having a particular person talk to, like Dan and Steve could get together. Michelle and Sharon Harrison maybe could, I think. And Carl. Carl, he's not here, but that's all right. I could ask him to do it. I think I'm going to see him pretty soon. So would that be?
Yeah.
Is that the way to go? And if anybody else wants to, did anybody here have a particular strength or interest that they want to do in regards to up to meeting 7 or through meeting 7? I think once meeting 8, 9, 10, 11, we're looking at working together totally. But certainly, somebody who knows something about PR, because that's what we talked about at the very first meeting, I think it was.
That seems like it comes in later, am I wrong about that?
Well, building support is meeting 7.
I see, yeah,
And I was
no, I
thinking-
would definitely
yeah.
help with that.
Okay. And actually, well, I was thinking Dan and Michelle could start doing some things initially now, in any way you want. Obviously, the building support, we don't know what we're gonna build support around.
Right.
Yeah. I wanna go back to what Paula said, because I'm gonna go to this meeting, it's the Southern, what is it, Peter? It's the Southern
It's the-
Berkshire Task Force, right?
No.
No?
The name changes, it's
Oh,
just a
geez.
challenge to remember the name. So the latest name is the Southern Berkshire Educational Futures
Okay.
Group.
Well,
And
I'm
we're
Futures.
hosting it, so it's
Right,
home
yeah.
turf.
Right.
So you could all come and really
Yeah,
freak
and one of the
out.
things, I'm gonna come and Rich Mahoney
What
is,
is it?
I think it's Rich is the
Next-
chair, isn't it?
I don't know if he's the chair.
I don't know.
It's next Wednesday at
Because somebody said something in the last committee meeting.
October 10th at 4:30 in Stockbridge.
Okay,
On October 10th, right?
Yeah.
and I think that's the place, I agree with Paul, it's obvious that South Berkshire is facing some real problems. And if I'm a financial person from South Berkshire, I'm wondering, it's nice to have one-room schoolhouses, but when their cost for the staff is $120,000,
Yeah.
plus updating it, which the town agreed to do evidently, for $250,000. So there's now $325,000 for 14 kids. It's, and a selectman, I was talking to somebody who said, oh, no, the parents love that. And I said, well, a selectman won his election on, this is ridiculous. And everybody kind of said, at least I got from the paper, said, oh, this guy's not gonna win, he's an outsider, he's a businessman, nobody in Egremant's gonna well, he won.
Yeah.
And he made sense, and I agree with Paul. That is a key to number 2. I mean, it to me, on this, when we were on the RAC committee, and an interesting acronym, I'll tell you that after that year, we looked at 2 high schools in South Berkshire. Lee and Lennox won, and us and South Berkshire, and that's what I'm going to say at this meeting. That's the way to go. And to do anything else is ridiculous. And I don't know, I didn't stay for the meeting because we're not part of that Berkshire Task Force thing. And I don't know what they spouted. I just heard the word one regional school for all of Berkshire County. And I got up because we withdrew ourselves from it.
Yeah.
The Berkshire Hills, with good reason, the committee unanimously voted because that's ridiculous. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah, so the only little thing I'd remind us is what may be obvious to people in this room
Right.
may not be obvious to other people, and tradition and legacy and all that
Oh, yeah.
stuff is slow to change.
Oh, yeah,
So,
Paul and I, well, all of us know here what that means. I mean, Lee and Lennox, there's a long history there. And there's a long history that goes back to, I think, Eileen, you said it in one meeting in 1955. It was over some slight. It was over the regional, when they formed, and they asked Great Barrington, and I guess Great Barrington said no.
to Lennox.
No, this was in
This is
1955.
Oh,
Because Mount Everett, I went to the Mount Everett when it was brand new. I was a fifth grader. I'll never forget it. Walking in that building and smelling the new, it was like a new car. I loved it. And I didn't know that they invited Great Barrington. Great Barrington said, no, we have Cyril's.
no.
So.
Well, and the history of people saying
But
no,
I mean, it's
right, and
it's time for this group to stop picking all the low fruit. I love that thing.
The
Somebody said,
low-hanging fruit?
The low-hanging fruit's been picked. It's time now to put their money where their mouth is and either put up or shut up.
Yeah, they would. I'm not gonna say anything.
Okay.
I agree with you.
It's
I agree with
good.
you.
I think I can say it.
Yeah, you can say.
I understand where you're coming from, but I can say it because Rich Mahoney has said it. Our school committee has basically said it.
Yeah, so hopefully we move forward.
Yeah.
Peter, can you, if you're gonna give us, documentation like this, can you get it out ahead of time?
Yeah, so people could study it
So
ahead
we
of
don't
time.
have to, we're all talking and we're all thumbing through here trying to look at figures.
Yeah, so I won't try. I make a commitment to get everything to everybody a week in advance. And that should give people plenty of time to read it and make sense of it.
You mean your secretary is gonna get it?
Well, she'll get it to people a week in advance, but I just need enough time that Steve, Sharon, and I can do the work. Because what we're talking about doing will take us a couple days, right?
Yeah,
So
to
we
get all
can't-
these demographic information. it's
We
gonna be a lot
can't
of
schedule a
time.
meeting for next week because, like, in addition to this, I got 27 other things I gotta do, right? But we could schedule a meeting for a couple weeks from now. Yeah, Eileen?
When you send it out, you send it also in advance to a meeting.
Yes,
Good.
I will. Was that a question or a direction? Yes, either way, I will do that.
Peter?
Yeah.
I'm sorry if you said this earlier and I'm slow to it, but can you just go over the process, the immediate process with communicating with the MSBA and what we're asking of them now? Because I thought we had to do all of this work and decide what we wanted to do in terms of a renovation, but it sounds to me like we can maybe toss our hat in the ring
So
without specifying what our plan is that right?
we and Steve
Yeah,
clarified on this if need be. We submitted a statement of interest, intent, SOI, a statement of interest.
Okay.
And they were interested enough in our statement of interest that they came out in very late June and ran through the high school with Steve and I and Steve Van and a couple other people. Their board is now deciding, and we were one of the first visits going into the summer, and they're still doing visits now. And I think initially they got something like 100 SOIs, and they visited 50 schools. So we made the first cut to get to be in the 50. And now they're putting them in priority order based on some complex rubric that they have. So there's the physical need and the likelihood of it moving forward and the capacity of the team to move it forward, and are the voters in that community going to support it, right? So presumably we're very high on the physical need. We're high on the capacity of our team to pull this off. The question mark is they supported us and twice failed in Great Barrington, and do they want to put their resources to a vote that could potentially fail again, right? So that's the question mark. And I don't know, and if they don't do it this year, and they're gonna announce something in December at a board meeting and in February. And if we don't make it through then presumably we take our statement of interest and update it, maybe like we change the doors a little, and I don't know what else and we fix up the science labs a little, and we submit it again, and see what happens, right? Eventually we'll rise to the top. It could be December, it could be February, it could be a year from December or a year from February, or it could be 5 years from December or February. If they accept us, we've done like a really good dress rehearsal for their process, right? This is a watered down, simplified, short version of it. And then we would do a whole nother process building on our work that would be much more technical in nature. And we'd hire an architect and a designer and do what we did with our previous project, right? So part of the reason we're doing this is we need to do this because we need to make an informed decision. Part of the reason we're doing this is in doing this might distinguish us as different from some other community that's just sitting around and waiting to hear from them, right? We're being proactive and taking the bull by its horns, or whatever metaphor one likes to use.
Okay.
Does that cover it?
Steve, you
Yeah,
wanna?
yeah, I think that covers it pretty well. My concern is that as I look at those two timelines, the timeline that this committee has been charged with, and by May or June we're supposed to go to the school committee. If we are accepted into that program, we're going to have to act before May or June. We're going to have to commit to. I mean, just because they accept us doesn't mean we have to accept them. But if we are going to accept them, we can't wait until May or June to do it.
No.
Or else the ship sails.
Well, I mean, so part of the thing, and this is, I think, it's a good transition to the next part of our meeting. Our next meeting, we already said, was on October 30th, right? But the meetings after that, and it starts to get hard around Thanksgiving and the winter holidays and all of that. But then maybe after that, we go to this really accelerated schedule every 2 weeks, and we're not going to hit a December deadline, even if we stood on our heads, right? But if we go to every 2 week, we might get done by February or March, which would line up pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding, and maybe I didn't hear it properly, was that their goal was to bring to their December board meeting the groups that they are supporting to move forward. Often they don't get all their data and everything together in order to make those recommendations, so then it bumps to the February meeting. They meet every other month.
Yeah, and I might have heard that they bring some people to a December meeting and some people to a February meeting.
I would imagine they do.
What do they need from us?
Nothing.
Right now, they don't need anything further, but if we were accepted and we, as this group and the school committee, decides we're going to go with them, then that ball starts rolling fast and pretty quickly.
I mean,
In regards to that, what do you need in regards to that ball rolling?
Well, initially you hire an owner's project manager, and then you get them on board, and they help us hire an architectural and engineering firm. We get them on board, and then it's all kinds of studies.
And you form a formal building committee, which is very much like this group.
Okay.
There's a list of like 20 people you need. We probably hit 16 of the 20, and we need to pick up a couple more people. The other thing I'll do is, even just based on our conversation, I'll annotate this a little bit, and I'll send them a copy of this and say, I just wanted to keep you in the loop. We're really moving forward and doing some deep thinking, and even though we're not obligated to do this, here's where we're at, and maybe I ask them for advice, right? And if you have any advice you want to share, that'd be great. And it just reminds them that, like, we're out here in the Berkshires, we're doing the thing. When we met with them, almost to the point of being idiotic, I reminded them that they needed a little orange pin in Western Mass, and that most of their projects are east of Worcester. And I'm like, remember, you need an orange pin in Berkshire County to look really good on your project. And I don't think they forgot that. I don't know if it worked, but they didn't forget it.
They might say you're the only one that turned us down.
Well, no, I know. So, I think this is enough for that. While we're still on the calendar, do we want to try to get a couple dates
That's what I
after
wanted to
the
do.
October 30 date? And then I'd love to share the data with you quickly, or the beginnings of the data.
We want to stay on Tuesdays, right?
I think that works
That was
well
the
for a lot of
consensus,
people.
wasn't
So I'm guessing that election day is a bad day.
How about the 13th?
I can't.
I have a school committee
bring them up
meeting
here.
in Richmond. I could do the 20th.
20th? 20th?
Thanksgiving week then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
2 weeks from then.
the 4th.
Is that 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's 2 weeks.
And all meetings are gonna be here.
Mhm.
So wait a minute, I missed that.
What day of the week are we talking?
Tuesdays. So October 30th, November 20th, December 4th. Do we try to squeeze one more in December before like December 18th?
I would, yeah.
Now, is it helpful to keep going, or do you want to? Look, we're not doing on the. I don't imagine we're doing on the 25th nor the 1st. It'd be a terrible way to spend New Year's in this room talking about financing.
You show a lot of commitment up here.
It would be really, really hardcore.
Steve, when do they meet in December?
I don't know when their board meeting is, do you?
I don't know. I could check. My gut
probably
is
on
it's
there.
highly unlikely that they'll make a decision
Yeah, I
about
don't-
us at their December meeting.
Yeah.
So I have a conflict on the 8th, but it may make sense to do it on the 8th, or would people prefer doing it on the 15th?
The 8th or the
January,
15th?
you're home.
The
Yeah.
town budget meetings are on January 15th, not the 8th, no.
Okay. So want to do the 8th tentatively?
Yes.
And if I can't rearrange that one, then I'll just pass the hat to our leaders.
It's the 12th, Dan.
6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Every meeting is at 6 here.
Okay. So, Michelle, I don't have the town budget meetings in front of me. Is the 29th of January something?
It's a budget meeting.
Okay.
We have the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. And the 9th, January 9th.
Is that town finance?
So February 5th is my birthday, and I'd love to spend my birthday with you all. Do we want to do that?
We'll bring cake.
That's 6. The 19th is the school vacation, and that could be bad for lots of people. I think. I'm assuming. I don't know that to be true.
What date, Peter?
The 19th of February. What do folks think about that?
Okay.
Could you be on some wonderful vacation with your family and stuff?
Probably not, but I can dream.
Is that February 16th?
Which meeting is that?
I think that would be the building support one.
But if that doesn't affect most people, it seems like. Oh, building support, yeah, I wanna be involved in that. I'll commit to that. Where am I gonna be? I'm not gonna be anywhere.
Okay. So maybe, yeah, okay. So the 26th is a joint meeting with the 3 towns on the school district's budget, so let's not do that. March 5th, we could do, it's a potential hold if we have to squeeze in another school committee meeting, but we never do. So I think that could be okay if people want to do that. Does that work?
Okay, we're on meeting 8, right?
Yeah, March
Okay,
5th.
yep.
The school committee meeting that we could, oh shoot. I was gonna suggest we do it on March 14th, but I think I'm not gonna be here. I think I'm gonna be out of the country visiting my daughter. So the next school committee meeting would be the 28th. Do we want to do the presentation on the 28th if people are okay with that?
Where would that be? Do we know?
Well, it's on my
calendar.
thing as a meeting confirmed the district office, but this might be a really good one, even though the acoustics are terrible, to do at the middle school.
Okay.
Because presumably that would be a good meeting to have a lot of people at. Right, community members and stuff.
It would be a good meeting to have here to show the need.
I don't know, I mean, if we did it here, it would be in the theater.
You might be in the middle of the musical, I don't know what the
Yeah,
dates are
the
this
musical,
year.
they'll be rehearsing.
If you're gonna try to do a presentation in the auditorium, it would work out.
Yeah, let me look into that. More than anybody, the musical would benefit from a renovation, so it might be in their own self-interest to do it.
I'll put middle school tentative.
The spring musical actually is on the 28th.
That's the first day?
We could be
The
the
opening act.
intermission,
We could be
exactly.
the opening
That'd be the one for
We would have
Can we sing it?
talk about like the promotion
Tag
meeting,
shoe.
we would have a full house. Yeah, so we can't do it here. So let's tentatively say the middle school. And then,
You're not gonna
You're not gonna,
do it the same day,
same
right?
night that they have the opening
School
of the.
committee will flip on that one. You hold that kind of a meeting on the day they open this musical.
That's a good point, Steve.
We already have the meeting scheduled
Yeah.
though,
When we
right?
flip.
It's already a scheduled school committee meeting, isn't it?
it was scheduled long before the musical was scheduled.
Oh, well.
This is what I
we
was
have a
screaming
potential
about
problem.
today.
Yeah, exactly.
You scream?
And once a year I lose my mind, and today was the day. Many hours ago, so
Well,
nobody's.
2019 and 2019 is just right around the
I know. Okay.
Your meeting's been scheduled,
So
but
you
not
can't
posted.
reschedule a
I mean,
school
you guys
Yeah.
could
Oh, yeah,
reschedule
no,
your school
exactly.
committee is my point.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You're 6 months away from that.
right.
yeah, I mean, that's interesting.
So we're gonna stay on the 28th,
No, maybe we move the,
musical.
See if we can get the school committee meeting on.
yeah.
What is the music?
I told you we needed to meet with them.
Doug, have they come up with a musical yet?
Mm.
Is the-
I do not know.
Okay. Yeah,
is
so
why Carl's
potentially we
on board.
move it to the 21st. And then
Fix all these things.
let's wait on the 10th and the 11th, if that's okay, or the 10th and the 11th meeting.
Okay.
to see where we are, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So, Bill and Paul, can I share something else quickly?
Yes.
So many of you participated in the survey, but not all of you. But I thought it was representative, so I printed out some, every response that I got, I put in this thing. So these were the 4 questions, and the survey's still live, so no shame if you didn't do it, but you can still do it. And then I think I'm gonna open it up to the high school folks, high school staff next. Right. So what did you like about the project? You can read it. I think that much of the stuff we've been talking about, right? Be open and more attractive, more opportunities for collaboration, science and technical classroom safety. I think that's fairly straightforward. What did people dislike? So the first person disliked the, I think the value engineering, all the things we did after the first plan to make it less expensive. Better explanation, some of the stuff around music, that we didn't sell it, that we don't need a STEM building, classrooms could be smaller, and it was excessive, as was the cost. And then I think the other questions 3 and 4 are just sort of the broader reflections on what other people liked and didn't like. And again, I think it's pretty similar. Right, and then the last one is the open-ended ones, and those are all over the place, and I think really interesting. And loud and clear, like we got to do a realistic and reasonable project. I'm not looking at you, but
Yeah, but it's true.
right.
Are we gonna put anything like this out to the public?
Yeah, well, I thought what the next round would be was I'd send it to the high school staff, and then I'd send it to everybody. At a certain point, what may make sense to do is, the numbers are small enough that I can handle the open-ended questions and responses. I think once it gets a little bigger, the same things keep coming up, right? So then maybe I take these open-ended responses and put them into a multiple choice format, and then have a few open-ended responses, just because from a data project, I don't quite have the time to, if we got a tremendous response rate and 1,000 people responded, I don't have the time to analyze all that data. But if it's multiple choice and I'm analyzing 500 open response questions, then I can do that pretty easily.
Did you just say the high school staff you were gonna?
That's what I thought next, because they're closest
Why
to.
didn't you just do the whole district staff? They all have, whether they're at the high school or not, many of them are taxpayers, and they should have a chance to chime in. Is that too many?
No.
The number of staff is what, 160 or so in the school?
No, like double that.
How many?
Over 300, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, it seems high.
Oh, well, are you talking about certified staff, employee, what's the category you're talking about?
Okay, I was thinking of the teachers, that's what I was.
No, I mean, so there are probably like 136, 140 teachers, and then
How many paras?
a bunch of paras, and then custodians and food service people, and
Office workers,
office workers.
counselors.
I stick with the high school.
Well, I mean, at least I'll do the same one for the high school, and then the next iteration of it will be multiple choice,
Okay.
right? And then if 1,000 people respond, or across all the towns, I mean, they're like 13,000 residents, I think, across the 3 towns. If it was multiple choice and every single person responded, I could handle that.
Will you just post it on the website?
I'll post it on the website, I'll send it to people, I'll send it to our media outlets, there's a link.
I mean, I just know Great Barrington and Dan, you probably know better, because Chris Rumble does a lot of surveys,
Right.
and I think they're pretty successful.
Yeah, I'll
You know,
talk
as
to
far
him
as
too,
KJ,
it's a good
yeah.
idea.
Do we know?
Can I ask a question on some of this?
Yes.
Whoever said it, I mean, we're a group here. On question 4, the third bullet down, spending money, especially while other construction costs are still on the books. I understand that, but people feeling they are spending money with no skin in the game. I don't understand that. I don't, like, what does that mean? That they don't have any connection with the education, or what?
Could be that they don't have any kids in school.
That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. People feeling they're spending money with no skin in the game, okay. Okay, so I see, okay.
Maybe they're
right.
referring to spending money on kids who don't
Go
are
here.
district residents.
Okay. Right,
Which
okay.
means that the people those kids' parents don't have to pay anything.
Okay.
That's how I interpret it.
Okay, how about the next one
When
down?
my friend wrote that, he was thinking.
The last one, the Berkshire Hills must recognize that if an upgrade is an extra, is that meaning if we renovate, that's an extra? Or is, if an upgrade, I mean, a renovation would be an upgrade.
I
think a particular improvement or
Okay.
a
Oh, okay.
particular part of it.
Like,
Didn't write it, but that's what I think.
I'm reading as watch the bells and whistles.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right, got it.
Okay.
What does too expensive mean? And is it worth having a question of creating like what would be an acceptable price for the project thing? Like a range of 30 to 40, 40 to 50?
Right.
I think you'd have to do that as how would it impact each taxpayer,
Yeah.
not a bottom line number.
Yeah.
It's more of what's it gonna do to my tax rate.
But I remember Dan making a comment, and I brought it up at my favorite watering hole, Averdale's. And I said something to somebody, I don't know who I was talking to, and I said, and they agreed that when that figure of 56 million, was it, on the ballot appeared, that's what they looked at, 56 million. I said, but that wasn't what it was. And they said they couldn't get over that. And I said it came up at a meeting. And I think, so no matter what the project costs, if it, with MSBA and everything, and it's gonna be that figure.
Well, I mean, the Winiger kept talking about it. If it was $1 a day on the tax rate, that people would pay $365 to have a great high school. But if it's any more than that, then people won't. And I thought that was interesting.
I wouldn't agree with him.
No, I know.
Yeah,
Well, lots of people
no,
didn't,
no.
but I thought that
I'm
was.
just getting my tax bill in Great Barrington, and it's gone up.
Right.
I mean, when you look at it $1 a day, to me, that's nothing. That's
Yeah,
a cup of
but
coffee.
you'll hear that all the time, even in town budget meetings. One of the selectmen will say, well, this is only X amount a day. But you have people who are giving up things every day. And so after a while, you hit a wall, there's no more. There's not another $1 a day. So there's a psychology there.
But then there may be this opportunity, and I think we'll talk about this in the financing thing, if we retire, or when we retire the debt on the elementary and the middle school, if the timing's just right and we swap out one for the other,
Yeah.
then it starts being
That's smart
possible,
business, yeah,
right?
it's good business.
If we do it at the same time, it's not good, and if we retire the debt and wait 3 years and then the rate goes back up again, it's not so good either.
Because that's compromise.
No, you don't
Some
want
things
to wait
happening in
till
the
it's
state
something
too
like this.
might affect all that as far as
That's what we're
um,
saying.
minimal
Yeah,
local
when it comes to
contribution
tax rate so much,
formulas
and
and things like that as they
So
change,
what do you
it's
say?
gonna
Well,
change.
I should, Dan brings up a good point. This meeting last night, that was the purpose, was what's happening with the foundation budget and what's happening with the chapter 70. And it was very interesting. The legislature hoped that the millionaire's tax would bail out their big issue, which was the recommendations from the whatever foundation commission it was. They thought they could do that with the millionaire's tax, but they were blindsided by the Supreme Court decision. All the legislatures there were Smitty, Hines, and Tracy Bouvier, Tricia. Okay, and they all said they were blindsided by the Supreme Court decision. That took $1 billion, $1.5 billion, I think it was, off the table. So now they were left, and the Senate evidently went for all 4 recommendations, but the House said, no, we got to go slow. Superintendents have talked to us, and so, as Smitty said, time ran out. But they're going to come back. So then somebody said, well, why can't you review what the technical issue was that the Supreme Court had, which was a technical issue, that they ruled that it couldn't be on the ballot. Well, then they got into, this is what it entails. It has to go through a constitutional convention. Then it has to go through two consecutive legislative sessions. I believe, Terry, am I right? 2 legislative
I think
sessions
2, yeah.
after a constitutional convention. So the least amount of time that all this will occur is 3 years from now.
Yeah,
And we're still dealing with the same problem.
On the other hand, and I don't mean totally to be a pain in the neck,
That's good.
the formula hasn't been adjusted in 25 years.
Right.
Right, so a 3-year dance through a constitutional convention might fix something that's been broken at that point for 28, 30 years.
That's right.
Maybe worth doing.
Yeah, well, I think that's what the message they have started to receive, both Smitty and all the representatives said. They look like they're gonna address this right away in January, but
Yeah.
that still remains to be seen. It was an interesting meeting last night. I hadn't attended, I didn't think I'd attend it, and my wife said, you're on the school committee, I think you ought to go. So I said, okay.
Yeah.
So I went, and I didn't stay for the Berkshire County thing, but it was really interesting listening to how our legislature perceives these issues. And it is interesting that Chapter 70 and the foundation budget, and I have some information I was going to share with Michelle after, on a thing on how wealth matters. They use Lee and Lennox as the example on how they figure out all this stuff, and it is really, we got into it in Iraq. Remember Alan Teal just said, you guys don't know your math, this is really stupid, and there are all these factors that go into it, but it is, I agree with Peter that, it's been a long time. They admit that. The legislature knows that, but they just couldn't act.
No. What's happened in other states that have been unresponsive is a group of citizens got together with some pro bono lawyers and sued the pants off the states for not meeting their obligation. Right, and somebody could do that.
Isn't there some movement on transportation?
Well, they said, and I was going to ask, I didn't have the figures. They said they funded regional transportation to 80%.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that reflective in this year's school budget, or?
So we budget less because we can't expect that they'll give us 80%. And I have to look. I don't remember if we budgeted 65 or 70.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. Just because they funded doesn't mean it's going to come through.
Well, there's that too, right?
Yeah.
And but then if it comes in,
It's like
so
little
that money will
asterisks.
come in, then that drops down to a revolving transportation account, and then we use that money to pay off part of next year's thing, which in the end means we're not, it's like we use the excess and deficiency to reduce the assessment to the taxpayers, right? It's like the town uses free cash to do that. Okay.
Other comments? Observations? Input? Anybody else want to?
Yeah, I think we got a lot of work to do, but this is a nice structure, and
Good.
we should start
Okay.
cranking now.
So we'll see everybody October 30th. I'll get a hold of Carl Bradford too.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know if he was not on one email list, and there's the possibility that